The following talk is offered freely to ensure that no one is ever denied access to these practices and to these teachings. If you feel inspired to make a donation to support this offering, you can go to my website at jonathanfoust.com. While you're there, you can also sign up for a monthly newsletter designed to support you in your practice. Thank you and enjoy. Two junior executives were hanging out by the water cooler, just talking about work. One of them glanced at his watch and said, "Whoa, I gotta go." His friend said, "Where are you going?" He said, "Oh, I'm going to a meditation class." And his friend said, "I didn't know you were into meditation." He said, "I'm not, but if you want to get ahead, this is where the senior management team hangs out." It's so interesting how much interest there is in meditation, and we all have different impulses for why we're attracted to the practice. You know, for some it may be, well, those are the cool people. That's where the deals happen, so hang out with them. For others, we're drawn to the practice because we know we need to manage our stress. Maybe your doctor told you it would be really important for you. Maybe you've read about the practice and what can come out of it. Maybe you're just aware there's some kind of unsettledness, some basic unsatisfactoriness about your life that attracts you to it. And maybe you've been intrigued by this talk of how this practice can lead not only to happiness and greater freedom, but really to a sense of liberation, of really deep freedom. I'd like to talk a little tonight about what are sometimes referred to as the four foundations of awareness, or the four foundations of presence. I have found these awarenesses to be very helpful in my own practice, and I hope they might for you as well. They're what it's like to become more and more sensitive to kind of the reality of our human experience and how you can find freedom in the midst of this play of the human experience. Essentially, it comes down to these four things that I'll touch on. One is what it means to be aware of the primary aspect of presence, which is life force. It's the energy that animates you. And then to be aware of how this life force takes form in the realm of feeling. How the feeling tone of your experience, which of course is constantly changing. And then being aware of what arises out of that feeling tone, which will be the narrative, the stories, the thoughts, that they just arise spontaneously out of what you're feeling on the inside. And then the fourth category is what it means to be aware of what we could call the different categories of all these thoughts and stories. And really some of the qualities of reality itself is all part of the recognition of reality as it shows up through our human experience. So I'd like to read, this is a little quote, a translation from the Buddha. And there's a word in here called the Dhammas, which is that fourth foundation. And there are different translations of the word Dhammas. The Dhammas can refer to sort of like the truths that you see, or the manifestations that you see as you're practicing self-observation. The instructions are thus: dwell contemplating the body in the body, ardent, clearly, comprehending, unified with concentrated one-pointed mind, in order to know the body as it really is. Dwell contemplating feeling in feelings, in order to know feelings as they really are. dwell contemplating the mind in order to know the mind as it really is. Dwell contemplating Dhamma in the Dhammas in order to know the Dhammas as they really are. This points toward a meaning or a definition of vipassana, which is the form of practice or insight meditation that we're practicing here. And that is to cultivate penetrating insights into the nature of reality. That's what this practice is about. It's about seeing clearly into the nature of reality. So the first place we pay attention is this primary experience of life force. Different traditions call it different things. The Holy Spirit, prana, chi, ki, animus. This energy in the body that is the difference between your body being alive and your body being a corpse. And so this is like the very first foundation of our experience, is to attend to that experience. And there's a primacy about it that is amazing to contemplate. For the last 3 summers, Tara and I have managed to spend many weeks up on the Cape for sort of practice and work and that sort of thing. And for some reason, every September I get sick. I'm thinking about not going anymore. But this summer, I got a virus after a family visit, and it's the Coxsackie virus, which is the hand, foot, mouth virus that mostly kids get, little kids get, but I found out adults can get it. And it's pretty nasty when adults get it. And it was a fascinating thing, because the previous week I'd been swimming a mile every day and just feeling like this, such a stud out there and feeling invincible. And then it was like this weather system started moving in. And then the weather system took over. And of course, I was pretty freaked out about what it might be, and then did some research and kind of figured out what it was. And basically, it's a virus. You really can't do anything. Just ride it out and, just relax for the next 2 weeks. And to sort of feel this energy take over my body and manifest, and then very, very, very slowly begin to move off, was horrible, but fascinating on some level. And it really thought about, all the stories when an influenza sweeps through a culture where, people are feeling fine and then they get sick and then they die and 20% of the population is gone. That primacy of energy is fascinating to watch. If you've ever had not saying this lightly, the opportunity of being someone as they're dying, being with someone as they die, you can see this, just how tenacious the life force is. As I sat with my dad and the hospice nurse said, okay, well, now you can see, how, basically the life force is abandoning the limbs to keep the core intact. And now you can see the breath is all designed to try to keep oxygen going to the brain, and slowly, 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 to the very last breath, this life force is designed to keep going. And reflecting on the body is a very integral part of this practice, because we fall into this mistaken belief that this body is permanent. We forget that the house is on fire. And so there are some amazing meditations. There's a meditation on the 37 body parts. There's another meditation on reflecting on your body, and you imagine that you have these different pails, and you put the skin in one bucket, put the muscle in another bucket, put the bones in another bucket, put the fat in another bucket, put the fluids in another bucket, and contemplate that. That's the body. It's not so much designed to create revulsion as it is designed to really create an understanding that if we can stay awake to the fact that your body is going to get sick, old, and die, that's very helpful for informing how you want to live while it's still intact. So when you bring yourself back to that raw experience, whatever your anchor may be, and I always find it, I've been practicing for a pretty long time, and I'm always amazed how far away my mind can be. And then there's some really kind of miracle of recognizing that I'm thinking, and then re-arriving and really feeling my breath as if it was the first time. To really sense, where do I feel the breath on the inside right now? And why the sound meditation is so powerful, because on one level we hear sounds, and on an intellectual level, your mind, before you're even aware of it, will go, that's a car, it's on the highway, and it's not going to harm me. You get the location, you get the name, determine whether it's a threat. But another way of practicing meditation, and it's really, really cool, and it's oftentimes referred to as bare attention, is listening to sounds without a story. That is to say, listening to just the pure, raw vibration of sound. I'll just take a moment, if you like, you can close your eyes. And as you close your eyes, remembering you can't hear better by trying harder, just for the next 30 seconds, can you identify and experience the sound vibrations? If you like, you might open your eyes, or you can stay with them closed. And you may have noticed how quickly your mind goes into thinking about the sounds. And there may only be milliseconds where you're actually experiencing the sounds. But this is this quality of just bare attention to the aliveness, the raw data of sensation, without a story. This is the foundation. And then what arises out of this is what we could call a feeling tone. And so feelings become an important part of the practice as well, and a place where you can really hone your attention on the feeling tone. So training in feeling can be really, really helpful. I know I've shared this story before, but it's one of my favorites. I was counseling a couple, and I kind of asked him to identify the issue, and he was describing the struggle and what he was doing, and he wasn't super skillful in trying to describe it, but he was trying really, really hard. I was really moved by his sincerity, and I sort of assumed that his wife or girlfriend would be moved too. So after he shared, I said to her, "Well, having heard this, what do you feel?" And she said, "I feel he's an idiot." Not what I was looking for. So there are three types of fundamental feeling that we're looking for here, and this is referred to as Vedana, and this feeling tone is how the raw data of sensation arises into three camps. One are all the sensations that you label and experience as pleasant. All the raw data that arises that you experience and label as unpleasant. And then everything in between, the neutral. It's not pleasant, it's not unpleasant, but it's neutral. And so paying attention to this is a very, very interesting part of practice. And I've mentioned before, but a wonderful teacher by the name of U Tejaniya, his whole guidance is around learning how to train your attention on the level of Vedana, to watch how you respond energetically to the moment, how quickly your attention will go to pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And it's really quite fascinating to see how something arises and you have an internal reaction. Imagine you're on an elevator. You're going up an elevator. The door's open, and someone creepy gets in, and the doors close. There's a felt sense of unpleasant. There's a clench. A family member asks you for a loan. Unpleasant. I always like to acknowledge, as an introvert, the inexpressible joy of having someone cancel a visit. Or maybe like the lump in your throat here at class when you find out they're having cookies afterward. So there's this automatic reflex in reaction to this raw data of sensation that is constantly playing back and forth. Like I just noticed when that loud car or motorcycle went by, I tightened. Just a little bit of, that's not good. So remembering that everything is happening all the time, sensations are happening all the time, and they arise as pleasant, unpleasant, neutral all the time. And you react all the time. And this sort of leads to this next level of foundation, which is to practice what it means to be aware of what arises in the mind. When I sat with my mother when she was getting toward the end, my mother had pretty extreme dementia, and she would talk a lot, but it was like she was narrating a dream. There was nothing linear to her thoughts. There'd be one thought and then a completely disassociated thought. But on some level, she was trying to string these random thoughts into a narrative that was kind of frightening to listen to. And I actually found the way that I could be with her was just to reflect back what she was saying, to kind of affirm what she was saying. That seemed to comfort her a little bit. Probably about 3 or 4 months ago, I started getting really hyper aware of how poor my sleep is. So I just started doing a lot of research on how I can improve my sleep, and I got this Aura ring, this sleep tracker, and my sleep started improving, and then I started being more aware of my dreams, and I'm much more awake inside my dreams, and dreams are pretty psychotic. Have you noticed? I mean, it's a form of psychosis. There's this unrelated, random firing thoughts that just seem to be completely beyond my control. And what we begin to notice in meditation is how a lot of our waking thoughts are pretty psychotic as well. And particularly when you have the opportunity to do more intensive practice, when you have days and days and days of uninterrupted self-observation, you begin to realize that the mind is nothing more than this thought-generating organ. It generates about 50,000 thoughts a day. I don't know who counted, but I'm not sure I want to meet the person who counted. But it's just pumping out thoughts. And again, just as we fall into this false belief that the body is permanent, so we fall into a false belief that all of our thoughts are real and true and valid. And this is where we begin to get a taste of what freedom is. When you begin to recognize that you don't have to believe every thought. You really don't have to believe every thought. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness of the thoughts. You also begin to notice how your mind has a commentary on everything. It has an opinion on everything, and it just doesn't stop. I just came from leading an intensive retreat this weekend, and part of the retreat, as in many intensive retreats, they use social silence as part of the retreat. So there's no speaking, no social speaking. And it has a very powerful way of amplifying the thoughts. Because quite often we're just not aware of the narrative. But again, back to this essential teaching from the Buddha, from that translation, is to rest awareness, to know the mind for what it truly is. And when you begin to recognize that the mind is simply a thought-generating machine, there can be a little more ease, just a little more ease. It's just a mechanical process of churning out thoughts. And when we're not aware of that, we get lost in the Pali word is papancha. And the word papancha means proliferation. That if you don't cut the thought process, it just keeps building on itself. It just keeps going and going and going. So you're quiet, you have this sensation inside, and you're thinking, oh, this is hunger. Oh, well, when did I last eat? I've been eating too much. But maybe there'll be cookies at the end of this session. But I really don't like these cookies that much. My mother made really, really awesome cookies. She made these German cookies with powdered sugar. The Germans make really good cars. When is my oil change scheduled? Oh, my schedule this week is really, really tight. My stomach feels tight. I'm hungry. When did I last eat? Maybe there'll be cookies. The endless cycle of thought. And you know how painful it is when you're sitting with someone who really believes their thoughts, So recognizing the thinking mind for what it is can cultivate a really deep sense of relief. But it continues. As you continue to sit and self-observe, you recognize that the foundation of your experience is the raw data of life force. That the raw data of life force forms into a feeling tone. That the mind immediately hops on that feeling tone and creates a story. So there's this sort of chain of proliferation I always like to name. There's the raw data of sensation, feeling tone, the thoughts that come out of the feeling tone. If you're not aware of your thoughts, and you think the same thoughts over and over and over and over and over again, those thoughts calcify into beliefs. And if you're not aware of your beliefs, they form your habits. And if you're not aware of your habits, they form your character. And if you're not aware of your character, that becomes your destiny. All arising out of sensation. All arising out of the aliveness of here and now. So part of how you can cut the proliferation of what we do here in our practice is, no matter how fantastical the thought, let it go. Come back and re-arrive. you just shifted from someone having a story, if just for a millisecond, someone with no story. Back to square one. There's a cutting through process here. So what happens is you begin to start seeing more clearly into the nature of these thoughts, and you start to see the patterns of reality and how they begin to show up as well. And again, having just come back from this intensive, I just got back a couple hours ago actually. It's quite extraordinary how many people came away with some pretty profound insights from really simply being present and practicing self-observation without judgment. Many people began to see more into their patterns, their reactive patterns and their conditioning, and sense new possibilities. So what you begin to see is into the nature of your conditioning. You begin to see how all of the conditioning over and over and over again creates these reactive patterns. So for a number of years, I helped to put together a pilot. This is at Whitman High School in Bethesda. A lot of the parents were really concerned that their kids were so stressed out. The pressure on kids is so intense. So they wanted to put together a little pilot on bringing mindfulness into high school. And I got pretty excited about that because I learned meditation in high school, and it just radically changed my life. Just from day one, it was like, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. It really moved me from being a very anxious, self-conscious kid to actually accessing some genuine creativity, or at least the illusion of it. So one of the things I used to ask the kids was, when the people in your family, your home, get really, really stressed out, how does it show up? And they were really, really quick and accurate in their assessments. Very aware. So, someone would say, well, my mom just gets angry all the time. I can't do anything to make her happy. Or my dad just gets quiet and he goes into his office and he won't talk to anyone. Or my stepmom won't stop nagging me about stupid details that I'm actually taking care of. Or my mom cries a lot and she sleeps a lot. Or my dad just works and works and works. And so when we named those patterns, then I reflected back to them. So what happened? So what's your pattern when you're stressed? And then that opens up a whole conversation around how we react. One of the really fascinating things about practicing sort of through this Buddhist lens is this: how many of the observations are noted, sort of from the Buddhist experience and others who practice, that you begin to recognize that there are certain patterns that show up in life. There are certain things that are really quite reliable. And here we have what are called the lists. And if you've looked at Buddhist philosophy or Buddhist psychology, it is list upon list upon list upon list. And these are sort of referred to as the Dhammas. These are sort of like the manifestations of life. And so just as when you look at stress, the stress patterns, the recognition, well, there are 5 classic ways that you react to life when it's not going the way you want it to. And so we have the five obstacles. Anger, aversion, judgment, blame, craving, wanting, fantasy, planning, disassociation, restlessness, anxiety, and worry, sloth and torpor, sleepiness, depression, doubt, and self-criticism. pretty clear stuff. And so you begin to recognize this. The more you pay attention to what arises through these four foundations of awareness. I often find it interesting when I'm doing a long meditation, for many, many days, is over time, and it takes a while, I'll begin to recognize like the top five stories that just keep going round and round and round. And just beginning to recognize how much of your life is informed by all this stuff you're not aware of. There's this whole mechanism of unseen, unfelt, undigested programming that is, in a way, controlling your life. The more you relax and settle, the more you begin to see, like, oh my gosh, I'm really driven by that emotion. Or I'm really driven by that belief. Is that belief really true? So I wanted to give you a taste of some of the lists, because it's pretty fascinating stuff. So they're broken down to there's the lists of two that the faculties we're cultivating are wisdom and compassion. There are two types of truth, relative truth and absolute truth. And then there's a list of three. And one of them is what are referred to as the refuges. Like, where do you go when you feel lost? The refuge of wakefulness, or the Buddha. The refuge of truth, of Dharma. And the refuge of love, of Sangha. And then there are the three characteristics of reality. And then the list of four, the Four Noble Truths, the four highest emotions, then the list of five, the five like codes of conduct that create the riverbanks for your practice of non-killing, of non-stealing, not to act sexually in a way that's harmful, to be mindful of speech, of harsh words, and not to cloud the mind with intoxicants. And then there are the list of 6, the list of 7, the list of 10, the list of 8, the list of 12. And then there's it goes on from there. But this is part of the revelation that occurs when you pause and slow down and pay attention. You become more self-aware. You become not only more aware of your own conditioning, of all the factors that have affected your view. All of that becomes more clear. But you also begin to see into the nature of reality itself. The recognition that everything is changing, of anatta, impermanence. The recognition that anything you resist results in stress and suffering. And the recognition that who you think you are is probably more vast than you allow yourself to believe. So again, to dwell contemplating the body, clearly comprehending and unified in order to know the body as it really is. To dwell contemplating feeling in order to know feelings as they really are. To dwell contemplating the mind in order to know the mind as it really is. And then to dwell contemplating Dhamma, or reality, in order to know reality as it really is. That's what this is all about. So much of our life is believing things that aren't true. So much of our stress and suffering is either believing things that aren't true or believing things that aren't true that are true. And that's why this practice takes real rigor. Because yes, the practice will help you find people who are really interesting and fun and cool. And it will help lower your blood pressure. And it will lower your stress. And it will inevitably point toward liberation and freedom. And where I was teaching this weekend, the founder of the community, Swami Kripalu, said this really, really profound statement. I keep coming back to it because it's just so real. Is that when you begin the practice of meditation with the intention to really be awake to reality, oftentimes what you encounter is not very pleasant because you are face to face with what's undigested in your life. And so his statement, he said, most people stop practicing meditation precisely because it's working. So I kind of think there are two levels of meditation. One is maintenance. You slow down, you pause, you're a little less reactive, you're a little more responsive, and you manage the day pretty well. But there's another level of meditation which is transformational. That if you stay with it, and if you can work with the inevitable resistance that's going to arrive in the practice, then it will absolutely change your life. Absolutely guaranteed. But it requires vigilance, and it really requires support, which is why it's so important to find other people who are interested in this stuff, because it ain't easy. It really, this is not an easy practice. I always describe this practice as brutal because it's a reality-based practice. But when you do experience those moments in your life when you're not identified with a story, when you're actually just present and awake, those are magic moments. That's when you sense what Deepak Chopra calls the field of infinite possibility. That's when the heart begins to open. That's when your path begins to open up, when you can sense the possibility and the potential of your life. So as hard as it is, there are so many fruitful moments in the practice when we can begin to sense the possibility of what it really means to be alive and to be happy, to be free. Why don't we close with a short yet brief reflection? And as you close your eyes, you might just sense the breath. And you might take a moment to open your attention to the sounds and just sense if just for a moment can you experience the sounds without a story, without a past or without a future. Can you feel the intimate movement of the breath on the inside? And can you sense what it means to be aware of the perception of feeling, and the play of unpleasant or pleasant or neutral, always shifting? To contemplate feeling in order to know feelings as they really are. You might take a moment to acknowledge the mind, this thought-generating machine. To contemplate the mind in order to know the mind as it really is. And sensing in your own way this perception of reality. The manifestations that arise moment by moment by moment. And to sense this quality of non-judging awareness. Your capacity to be aware of the body, to be aware of the play of feeling, to be aware of the movement of thought forms, to be aware of the manifestations as they arise. This quality of what we might call the awakened heart and mind. Non-grasping, non-judging, awake and spacious. And in these final moments, just sensing this path of your journey. Imagining your life more and more intimately informed by this quality of non-reactive awareness. Your capacity for freedom and happiness. And as you're ready, you can deepen your breath. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And one final Zen pop quiz. If you can pay attention to that play of Vedana, the felt sense, and sense what happens in response to what I'm about to say. It looks like we don't have cookies tonight. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope this is helpful. Enjoy your evening.